Welcome to the 33rd Annual Mayor's Environment Expo. As we come together from around the city, I would like to acknowledge that the Calgary area, where the Bow and Elbow Rivers meet, is a place of confluence, where the sharing of ideas and opportunities naturally come together. Indigenous people were the original caretakers of this land and the first champions of environmental conservation. This land is a home that we all share, and it's vitally important that we protect our home, our environment, by working together. What drives my optimism is seeing the innovation and commitment to climate action from all of you, our students. I will continue to amplify youth voices on the climate crisis, and I look forward to hearing your ideas. I hope this session sparks conversations and encourages all of us to take greater action in protecting our environment. Thank you all for participating.
Hello and welcome to the session, Conservation Scientist for a Day. My name is Jessie Wise and I am the Conservation Education Program Coordinator at the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo.
And I'm Jacqueline Colville, the School Program Coordinator at the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo, and I'll be your moderator today.
In the spirit of respect and reconciliation, we honor and acknowledge the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as the Eahey Nakota First Nations and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and we acknowledge all peoples who live, learn, work, and play on this land. Zoo Island is located near the confluence of the Bow and Elbow Rivers. This sacred place, Mohkinstsis, is where the story of the Blackfoot peoples began. It is an honor to add our stories to this sacred and storied land. In this workshop, you will become a conservation scientist for a day. You will have the opportunity to research the needs of a threatened or endangered animal of your choosing, design enrichment opportunities for them in a zoo setting, and share conservation initiatives in place to help this animal species in the wild. You will then share your findings via ArcGIS Story Maps, a digital application used by conservation scientists. Scientists utilize ArcGIS Story Maps to present their research and data to public audiences. Now, let's begin by talking about conservation. What does conservation mean to you? We'll allow the next couple minutes for a dialogue to come up. And while we're waiting, I'll give you a hint. So when we think about conservation, think of the word conserve. If we conserve something, what is the purpose of what we are trying to do? And right now I will open the Q&A to see if any schools have listed some responses. And while we're waiting, our moderator, Jacqueline, do you have any ideas about what conservation means? Feel free to write it in the chat.
This is an interesting conversation, Jessie. I'm excited to see what our students think. Conservation makes me think of the word conserve. I wonder if that's something they're thinking too.
It very well could be. I'm interested to see what their responses are. And while we're waiting, I'll give you another hint. So when we talk about water conservation, We are talking about wanting to conserve water, specifically reducing the amount of water we use. So some ways we can engage in water conservation is turning off the tap when we're brushing our teeth. Perhaps it could mean taking shorter showers. And I am just going to the Q&A now. Wonderful. So we have some comments here. So someone said to protect. Another option is use less. Absolutely. So that could be use less energy, perhaps turn off the lights in your house, use less water. Again, that example of when we're brushing our teeth. Wonderful. Now let's move on to our next slide. Wildlife conservation refers to how we take action to protect animals, plants, and their habitats. At the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo, we engage in conservation efforts in a few different ways. At the zoo, we support the conservation of endangered animal species by engaging in species survival plans, or SSPs. SSPs are carefully managed programs led by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums that make breeding recommendations between accredited zoos for at-risk and endangered animals. This means zoos will often loan out animals to expand specific gene pools. By matching the right animals, the hope is that they will produce offspring, that is, have babies, which will help maintain healthy genetic diversity of endangered animals in captivity. This year, we are so excited to announce that our Western lowland gorillas were actually a successful breeding pair with the species survival plans. Our true Western lowland gorillas, Dossie and Jasiri, welcomed their own baby on April 20th. And here you can see this picture of Dossie and her baby. It's such a sweet picture. The Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo uses innovative science to save threatened and endangered species and return them to the wild where our planet needs them to be. Our conservation expertise is focused in two areas: community conservation and conservation translocations. Community conservation empowers local communities to benefit from and protect wild species. These initiatives protect nature while improving the livelihoods of local people by building capacity, increasing ecological awareness, and creating employment opportunities for people. Conservation translocations return endangered and at-risk species to the wilderness to prevent their extinction. Individuals that will be released can be taken either from the wild or from conservation breeding populations. Translocations require sound science, long-term investment, and continued monitoring to be successful. Now that you are aware of what conservation science is and the different ways on how we can engage in conserving animal species, let's look at a case study: Western lowland gorillas. Conservation scientists need to understand the needs of the animal and the threats they face in the wild to understand what conservation efforts they need to create in order to benefit them. We are going to show you an example of a story map featuring Western lowland gorillas. The first section of the story map will focus on researching their lives in their natural habitat in Africa. The second session of the story map will focus on how we provide enrichment activities at the zoo to ensure that they remain happy and healthy. The third section will focus on conservation efforts that benefit gorillas in the wild. Now, on your page, you will see our example of the gorillas story map. Here, my title, I have gorillas, and my subtitle, their natural habitat, life in human care, and the conservation efforts to protect them. So here I've addressed the three sections that I want to share with my public audience in my story map. Firstly, you will see Gorillas in the Wild as my title. And in my paragraph, I talk about how a group of gorillas is called a troop. I talk about their diet, which includes a vegetarian diet. However, they also eat things like bamboo shoots and stems. And Western lowland gorillas, they even forage for termites and ants. As they go lower, I talk about where they create their habitats. So this can include different areas in Africa, such as in the mountains, in remote dense rainforests, and even in isolated swamps. Here, I go on to talk about 4 different subspecies of gorilla. That includes the Cross River gorilla, mountain gorilla, western lowland gorilla, and eastern lowland gorilla. However, today we will be focusing the presentation on the western lowland gorillas. A great feature of ArcGIS story maps that conservation scientists use is inputting data on a map so they can see where the animals are located or where their habitats are in the world. So in this case, with western lowland gorillas, the conservation scientists inputted the data where they found where the troops are living. And this blue patch right here on the map represents the different areas where you can find western lowland gorilla troops. So as you zoom in, you can see that all of the troops are located in all of these different countries in Africa. So it is very amazing to see, and it's interesting for your audience to see as well on a map setting to see where your animal of choice lives in the world. Moving on to our next session, we look at caring for animals in the zoo or caring for animals under human care. At the zoo, our goal is to protect and conserve wildlife. Therefore, we follow the 5 freedoms of animal welfare. This means that animals have the freedom from fear or distress. They have the freedom to express normal behaviors, meaning we want them to engage in the natural behaviors that they would do in the wild. They also have freedom from hunger and thirst, meaning that we provide them with a healthy diet. They have the freedom from discomfort, pain, injury, and disease, meaning that we provide them with medical care and consistent checkups to ensure that they are healthy. And they also have the freedom to make decisions and have reasonable control over their life. So we want to make sure that they have control over their life. If they don't want to be out in the public habitat for people to watch them, they are more than welcome to go in the back and be comfortable in an area closed off to the public. So we always want to make sure that our animals at the zoo are happy and healthy. Now, we are going to move on and talk about enrichment. What is the purpose of enrichment? In this case, gorillas, like us humans, are very intelligent and they can also get bored. So to prevent our gorillas from getting bored, the animal care team gives them new enrichment every single day. Other reasons we provide enrichment are 1, to encourage natural behaviors, and 2, to stimulate their physical and mental health. If I scroll down, we are going to go over the different senses, the different ways we can provide enrichment for our western lowland gorillas. The first is environmental. Gorillas are extremely intelligent animals, and we want to ensure they don't get bored of their habitat. So the animal care team actually changes 3 things in their habitat every day to make it interesting. In their habitat, they also have things to explore like tree branches, conifer trees, boxes, ropes, and they even have a slide with canola oil that they can go down on. They also have sensory needs, and on special occasions, for example, like a gorilla's birthday, the animal care team will provide them with a very special cake made of yogurt and fruits. They also get smoothies every morning with medicine inside to keep them healthy, and we'll even put different scents in their habitat. So we want to encourage those natural behaviors that they would use in the wild, like their strong sense of smell. They are also provided with fruit popsicles where once they lick the water, they can get the fruit that's inside. Gorillas, like us humans, are very social. So they actually share their habitat with other members of the gorilla troop, with colobus monkeys, and they might even want to socialize with you when you come to the zoo. And finally, we focus on their physical enrichment. Remember, the purpose of enrichment, we want to ensure that they're engaged mentally and physically. So we want to make sure that they're moving their bodies every day, they're getting exercise so that they can stay healthy and strong. So in their habitats, the gorillas have climbing structures to explore, new items are placed in there every day, and they are also scatter fed, which means we'll place food all along the floor in their habitat, and this encourages the troop to move around and find the food similar to how they would in the wild. So remember, Western lowland gorillas in the wild, they also eat ants and termites. So we scatter feed them here as well so they can engage in those natural behaviors. Now, the animal care team also trains our gorillas. And it is very important to us that we do it through positive reinforcement. So our animal care team, they use a clicker, and if the gorilla does what they want, then they're provided with a treat. So mentally, the gorilla thinks, if I hear the clicker, I get a delicious treat. So next time I hear the clicker, I will go up to the animal care team. Now, this helps our animal care team with providing them with medication or just doing a wellness check to make sure that they're still happy and healthy. The last section of my story map focuses on conservation of gorillas. So at the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo, we have a couple of different programs here that focus on gorilla conservation. The first is Gorillas on the Line. Did you know that cell phones use an ore called coltan, which is mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo? This mining takes place in important gorilla habitat and is contributing to habitat loss and, as a result, the endangerment of gorillas. Thus, we are participating in a campaign called Gorillas on the Line, where we recycle old cell phones and turn them in so that that coltan, that ore, can be recycled and reused in future electronics. This helps ensure that we don't have to continue mining ore, which is leading to habitat destruction in gorilla habitat areas. We also engage in the Species Protection Plan. So as mentioned previously, the Species Protection Plan ensures that we are saving endangered animal species, and the goal is to match the right animals to each other to ensure that they produce offspring, but with genetic diversity. As I scroll down to the end of my story map, you'll see here that I included engaging videos. I also included a link to the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo, where I can show how people can actually donate to the cause and continue to contribute to wildlife conservation. Now, prior to today's session, you will have received a few different resources. The first resource is an ArcGIS story map tutorial. So again, that is a tutorial for how to use the program. The Gorilla ArcGIS story map, which is the map I just showed you. A student resource, which is this yellow resource here, which shows you a step-by-step of how to engage in this Conservation Scientist for a Day project, as well as a lesson plan for your teacher. Now, here we will watch the tutorial for how to use the ArcGIS Story Map application. ArcGIS Story Maps is a tool that allows you to make an interesting presentation by combining maps, text, images, and videos. By learning how to use this tool, you're one step closer to being a scientist, as real conservation scientists use the same thing to present their research and data to the public. Does that sound exciting? Let's get started. We're going to begin by following this link where we'll prompt you to sign in. Once you sign in, you're given the option to create a free account. If you don't already have an account, please make one at this point. You will have to activate your account via a link sent to your email, but then you are good to get started. Once on the main page, you're going to click on the button in the top right corner that says New Story. You're then going to select Start from Scratch. To start off, you can select the Design tab at the top of the page.
Here, you can choose the layout of your cover page, if you want navigation or credits on, and the colors as well as the font that you want to be used throughout your story map. To the right of the design button is a preview where you can view how your story map will look when it's published. Next to that button is Publish, where you can make it so that everyone can view your story map. Now for the map itself, you can begin by making your title, adding a description, and choosing a cover photo. Next, once you scroll down and click the plus sign, this is where you can get very creative. You have an option to add text, add a button that will link to a website, or add a separator line. If you want to add a map, select that option and choose an express map. Here you can add pins to locations or draw an area of interest. You can also insert an image or video as well as include a swipe that allows you to compare two photos. The process for creating a slideshow or a sidecar that allows you to see the content one step at a time is the same. Finally, you can do a map tour to guide viewers through a map. To do this, you click on the map tour option, choose to start from scratch, choose between guided or explorer, choose between map focused or media focused, and then you can start adding your content. In the end, your story map will look something like this. Take the time to explore this story map before starting research for yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you for listening to the video. Now that you have seen an example of a story map, you can put on your conservation scientist hat and pick an animal. The animal must be classified as endangered or critically endangered as per the IUCN Red List of Endangered Species. IUCN is the International Union for Conservation of Nature. This organization is a global authority on the status of the natural world and the measures needed to safeguard it. The IUCN Red List assesses the conservation status of species at a global level, drawing on quantitative data and expert knowledge from around the world. On the right-hand side, you will see some images where if we look at a particular animal, we can see where it falls on the bar graph here of its conservation status. So NE refers to not evaluated, to data deficient, meaning we don't have enough data to determine its conservation status. Least concern would mean that we're not concerned about them going extinct. Near threatened, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, and then we go to where we absolutely don't want any animal species to go to, which is extinct in the wild or extinct, meaning that there's no animal left in the world. So in the case of your project, we are interested in searching for animals who are classified as endangered, meaning they're facing a very high risk of extinction in the wild, or critically endangered, meaning they're facing extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. These images show what the IUCN website looks like when you search for an animal. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can select options to narrow your search of animals who are on the IUCN Red List. Under the Red List category option, you can select endangered or critically endangered to only show animals with this conservation status. You can also view the threats each animal faces and what conservation action is needed on the left-hand side of the screen. For example, if you were interested in researching about endangered or critically endangered animals who are affected by pollution, then you can specifically select the boxes that say critically endangered, endangered, as well as on the threats category number 9, pollution. Within these tabs, they go into subcategories, so you can look specifically for water pollution, air pollution, and more. Now, when creating your story map, the beginning of your story map will be the name of your animal. Once you have selected an animal, you will begin researching the animal and what factors have contributed to their threatened status. You should include the following in your research. Where does this animal live in the world? What is their geographic location? What habitat does this animal live in? Does the animal live on their own or in a group? What is the diet of this animal? What are their needs? What are the threats this animal faces? Each section should address the questions above. Now let's engage in an activity. We will do a think, pair, share, and let's talk about animals who live in human care. And let's think of these two questions. Why do you think it's important for us to provide enrichment to animals at the zoo? And on a personal level, can you think of examples of enrichment you do at home with your pets? Please turn to a friend sitting beside you and come up with ideas of enrichment examples and share it with your teacher. Your teacher will share your ideas in the chat box. And for this activity, we will allow 2 minutes. And remember, friends, when we were talking about the gorilla story map, we looked at different senses and different types of enrichment we can provide. So that includes the mental enrichment, social enrichment, physical enrichment, sensory enrichment, and try to think of examples with those. And while we're waiting, I will provide an example of enrichment I do with my dog at home. So my dog, she loves to exercise, but she's quite a big dog. So walking around the house isn't enough. So a form of enrichment I do with my dog is taking her for long walks around the park. I also like to provide her with sensory enrichment. So I will provide her with different types of toys that she can use. Maybe they have squeakers and that's fun and engaging for her. Maybe they're different shapes. Maybe one is plastic or one is furry. So they're different textures in her mouth that she finds interesting. So think of those types of examples when you answer in the Q&A chat box. I will also provide some examples from the gorilla. So remember, with the gorillas, we like to provide them with the physical enrichment. So we ensure that they have climbing structures. With sensory, we'll give them a popsicle that's frozen when they first get it, but as they lick through the water, they receive the yummy fruits inside. Another example is social. So we would never house a gorilla by themselves. They're a social animal and they need to be in a troop. So they would be housed with other gorillas. And here I see that someone said snapping my fingers when I say a command. Absolutely. So even with animals in our own home, like dogs, we want to ensure that they are trained properly. So for our safety as well as their own. So in this case, snapping my fingers when I say a command, then that dog understands their owner when they say, oh, I need to listen to my owner right now. So great example. Let's move on. The next section of your story map is titled Enrichment. Once you have determined what the animal needs to thrive in the wild, you can determine what this animal would need to thrive if they were being cared for in a zoo setting. You will need to come up with enrichment activities for your animal. That is, what things will keep the animal engaged, happy, and interested in their habitat. Questions you can consider are, where will the animal sleep and rest? How will the animal be engaged physically? For example, are you including climbing structures, pools, rocks, dens? Another question is, how will the animal be engaged mentally? For example, at the zoo, our Egyptian tortoises live in a rocky habitat. However, we have a little piece of grass there so they can feel the different texture and it's interesting. Another thing you could engage them mentally with is using unfamiliar scents. For example, our carnivores at the zoo, they have really amazing senses of smell. So we'll include maybe a spritz of perfume or some cinnamon, and that keeps them engaged in a natural behavior they would use in the wild, which is following their nose, following their sense of smell, and seeing what that new smell is and investigating what it could be. Another way you could engage them mentally is a Nose It Ball, which is basically a puzzle for animals where they have to try to figure out how to get the treat out of it. Also, you must think, will the animal need to be housed with other animals? So are they solitary like a Komodo dragon, or are they social like meerkats or gorillas? And lastly, what training will the animal need for health checks? So, if your animal was a giraffe, how would you get their hooves trimmed? Or if you chose a hippopotamus, how would the veterinary team brush their teeth? Let's do another activity, a think, pair, share activity. And let's think about conservation again. What types of conservation action can you do? Please turn to a friend sitting beside you and come up with ideas of conservation action and share it with your teacher. Your teacher will share your ideas in the chat box. And while we're waiting for responses, I will share some examples of conservation action. So remember, at the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo, we have the program Gorillas on the Line, where we take in old recycled electronics in order to get the ore coltan. So why does this help gorillas? Well, if we mine for coltan in their habitats, then this actually leads to habitat loss and destruction. So if we are able to recycle the electronics and reuse the coltan ore, then we don't have to keep on mining for that in their habitats. Another great example of conservation action at this year's Conservation Champions Festival, which took place in May, was there was a school group who focused on pollinators, and they shared education awareness by telling our public audiences how to create pollinator gardens to ensure that pollinators had places where they could have nectar, but also pollinate different plants and flowers. So let us see in our Q&A if you provided any examples of conservation action. Wonderful. So I see here someone mentioned reusing water bottles. Absolutely. So if we don't buy plastic water bottles every time, then we're potentially reducing plastic pollution, which is greatly affecting our oceans. So that's a great example. Definitely use reusable water bottles. Another person said recycling properly. Yep, so make sure you know what goes in the green bin versus your blue bin and black bin. Another person said composting and planting flowering plants. So absolutely, we want to encourage those pollinators. Great, thank you for participating. Let us move on. The last section of your story map should be titled Conservation Initiatives or Conservation Efforts. You will also explore what conservation efforts are in place that are benefiting the animal species of your choosing in the wild. You can search for conservation initiatives on the IUCN website by going to your chosen animals page and looking at the Conservation Actions Needed header. You could also search for other conservation initiatives by searching the animal name and conservation efforts onto the Google search engine. Another alternative is you can create your own conservation action project and help the animal you selected in the wild. Once you, conservation scientists, have finished, my apologies. My apologies for the technical issue. Now, once the conservation scientists have finished researching the animal of your choosing, as well as enrichment activities and conservation efforts, you can present your findings on ArcGIS story maps. To make it engaging for your audience, your story map should include pictures, maps of where the animal lives in the world, and videos in addition to your text. You can use the Gorilla story map as inspiration for your own story map. Thank you for listening and for being a conservation scientist for a day. You can make a difference and take action to conserve wildlife and wild places. Teachers, if you register in a school program at the zoo in the 2022 to 2023 school year, then your class will get a free invitation to join the Conservation Champions Festival in May 2023. Please feel free to contact me at conservationchampions@calgaryzoo.com for more information. Thank you for supporting wildlife conservation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box. And on another note, if you are interested about learning more about our school programs, my moderator Jacqueline here has provided the link to our school programs website. We also have an exciting program called Zoo School where you can interact in engaging on-site activities at the zoo for a week. And we also have exciting educational festivals at the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo, one of them being the program I mentioned, Conservation Champions Festival, which will take place from September to June. And we provide you and your class with year-long engaging video resources, lesson plans, and more. And then you'll be invited back to the zoo in May for the Conservation Champions Festival, where you can share your project that you worked on throughout the year, which focused on conservation action with the public. So we hope you're interested, and we would love to see you at the festival. And we hope to see you at next year's Mayor's Environment Expo. And thank you for listening.